Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Jim Albright, and I am absolutely excited to be back with all of you again for what I'm sure is going to be an amazing Beyond Compliance presentation. Now, today we are going to hear from two incredible food safety experts around how you, your teams, which includes your senior leadership team, can help break down those functional silos that we know exist today and help make food safety top of mind for everyone every day. Now, before we dive in, for those of you who may be new to the series, Beyond Compliance is a monthly program that's designed for process manufacturers to hear some new ideas on how to consistently meet quality and safety requirements while boosting production efficiency. And our speakers provide some actionable and proven best practices so that you can start using these tips today to give you better visibility to overall plant health and drive efficiencies that hopefully will exceed your line, plant, and business goals. So awesome to have you here with us. Beyond Compliance is brought to you by SafetyChain. They're the developers of the holistic digital plant management platform that's trusted by thousands of process manufacturers to unite plant production and quality teams and maximize throughput and yield, ensure quality and compliance, and optimize labor and productivity. Now, just a few quick housekeeping items here. First, we've muted all attendee mics, but you can submit your comments and questions at any time during the presentation because we are leaving room at the end for our speakers to get to answer them. And yes, we are recording this session, and we will absolutely be sending you that recording along with the slides later today, so keep a lookout in your inbox. Okay, so let's meet today's speakers. I am absolutely thrilled to have with me today Tia Glave and Jill Stuber, the co-founders of Catalyst LLC. Now, I know many of you have probably heard Tia and Jill speak at some kind of industry event or maybe on another industry show or podcast, or maybe you've read some of the many published articles they've written around the food safety culture topic. So Tia and Jill, thank you very much for joining us today to help us better understand ways that we can level up our food safety culture game. So we're very glad you're here.
Well,
Thank you.
so much.
Yeah, it's very excited to be here.
All right. Now I'm excited too because I know there's a poll question coming up and we're going to get a little participation from the audience. So everybody get your little clicker fingers ready. But Tia, Jill, I'm going to let you drive. So take it away.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We are excited to be here. And thank you so much to SafetyChain and the team for giving us the opportunity to share and interact with your audience. And there is a poll coming up. And today we want you to be present and we want you to be engaged. We want you to use the chat. We want you to ask questions and add your comments and your perspectives because that's how we all learn. And then before we get started, I do want to invite you to just take a couple of seconds to clear your mind so that you're here and present. What we actually have our clients do is take a couple of seconds to write down all the things that might be at the top of your mind. The email that you need to send, the presentation you need to review just one last time, whatever's on your mind, just take a few seconds right now to write it down. Because all of those things are going to be there when you get out of this webinar.
Absolutely.
So let's give like about 5 seconds to write those down, clear your mind, because we want you to be present and engaged here.
Yeah, it's amazing how our brain will actually give us a little bit of rest when it knows we've taken care of those things.
Yes, yes.
I love this. This is perfect. I love it.
Well, that's because we want everybody to have a clear mind because, of course, the next thing we're going into, we want to start with a poll. How does the food safety function tend to be viewed at your organization? We'd love to know, do they see you as a showstopper? Is the function an enabler, or is it somewhere in between? We know that each organization has a different culture around how food safety is viewed. You know, we know there are macro cultures, there are micro cultures. So what it feels like at one facility, you may have a different feeling at a different facility or maybe even corporate. Or perhaps the maintenance team views food safety one way and purchasing views it another way.
Yeah.
I always say, and even for individuals, right? Sometimes you've got like A production manager who sees food safety one way, and product development maybe sees it another way as well.
Yeah.
All of these are ways that we view food safety function in our organization. And how we get along and collaborate is often about feelings and whether or not a function is viewed as helpful or not.
Mhm.
So the historical view, right, of silos around food safety come from food safety being viewed not as just not so helpful, but as a necessary element in the business. And I see when we look at our poll results that we have a little bit, about almost 20% where it's a showstopper, a much smaller percent at 2% is enabler, and then we got a whole like playing field in between.
Yeah, probably where some functions see you as an enabler, others not so much. Right?
So we're glad you're here because today that's what we want to talk about. How do we move from maybe that somewhere in between to more in the enabler category?
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for answering our poll, because the thing is, we've been exactly where you are. We have spent decades leading food safety and quality at large, medium, even startup companies across many different industries. And Catalyst was founded on the concept that we have to set our food safety and technical teams up for success better than what we do today, so that we can become those trusted business partners our organizations need. So we can move from this feeling of showstopper, right, to an enabler.
You know, and I think, as Tia said, part of why we're here is because we've been there. And we know to become the business partner our organizations need, it takes each of you to get out of your comfort zone, to increase your self-awareness, and put people at the center of what you do every day in a new way. The best part is that when we honor people and tap into their gifts, like you create a culture that allows food safety to enable business instead of being that naysayer or somewhere in the middle of where we saw all that, the poll. But we know this because we all know from Gallup and all the other engagement surveys that as engagement increases, results will follow.
Yeah.
Right.
So today, with the next slide, we're going to dive into 3 areas. The first is why food safety isn't viewed as a critical business enabler today. We'll then move to how can influence shift that perception and break down those existing silos. And then we'll talk about what food safety leaders can do to build and expand their circle of influence and leverage relationships for business results. So let's get started. So first, one of the top complaints we hear from food safety leaders is that food safety does not have a seat at the table. Things happen around us, and then people come to us to fix things. But we know that if we were just invited to that first meeting, we could have been able to prevent issues from happening in the first place. I know I felt that way. So why isn't food safety viewed as a critical business enabler today?
Yeah, that's a great question and one we get all the time. So on the next slide, you're going to see why. We're in silos. And while they might not be all as hard as the ones that we see here on the screen, the poll definitely shows us that we have different varying degrees of where our function tends to be viewed. You know, we like to say silos have a great purpose. Like here, they store grain, milk, other things, but we all know they don't have a great purpose in your organization. You know, unless people like to work hard, work too hard, work inefficiently and ineffectively. I'm guessing we don't have any takers on that, do we?
Not at all.
Probably not.
You know, working in silos means communication is broken, or communication doesn't flow across teams and functions. And most importantly, relationships are weak. We all know life is easier when we flow together and everyone is clear on our parts. We also know food safety is easier when organizations see us as key relationships, where they welcome us to the table. It's easier when they see us as business partners, people who care about the business along with caring about food safety.
Absolutely.
And so the next slide shows some headlines. And these headlines say it all. it really shows how food safety, and I'm kind of giving the air quotes, failed in organizations. And for organizations to return to good graces, they have to do food safety instead of wanting to do food safety. And our roots in food safety stem from regulatory compliance, and that has continued along with, GFSI and gluten-free and humane handling, organic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And even as we talk about culture, right? How are we going to regulate culture? Those are the conversations, sort of like where food safety stem from. But what we do know is no company wants their name to be headlining the daily food safety news report or any other news outlet for making people sick or worse, dying.
Yeah. And I think this is our challenge because when we think about it, like Tia said, we grew from a place of compliance, food safety did. And so this is really our honor and responsibility to demonstrate we are more than compliance. We are business partners that are here to drive more than just those food safety outcomes, which we are very passionate about and we will continue to drive. But we also want business outcomes as well, because without those, we don't have anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you see the next slide, if you've been in food safety for a hot minute, you're all going to recognize this look.
Oh, yes.
Right? How often do people see you coming and you get one of those looks? People are like, oh no, please not me. Or what do they want now? Or what got screwed up? We see this face often because we haven't integrated as well as we can as business partners.
Yeah,
And
those showstoppers are probably mad, right? People that think we're showstoppers.
yes, very good point. They see that, and these faces say 1,000 words when we see them coming. And our goal is really, how do we change from this to what we see on the next slide? To this, right? When people are happy to see us, they are open to sharing and learning together. When they know we support their goals just as much as they share our goals because we're aligned, because they know we're here to help, and we will roll up our sleeves to really support them and help do the work. That's when we get big smiles. Well, maybe we don't get the big smiles every time, but hopefully more than before.
True, true. How we show up being collaborative and curious and keeping the bigger picture in mind helps us show others that we are here to be business partners and we're dedicated to tearing down the silos.
Absolutely. And so on the next slide, we're going to talk about part of what we're here to do today. It's going to talk about one aspect that we cover in our technical leader bootcamp. It is influence. The real question is about how we move out of silos. How do you do it? How do you move to where people work without including food safety, to where people feel compelled to include food safety and even own their part? So I think on the next slide, Tia's going to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it really does start with influence. As a technical leader, you are responsible for providing input and making decisions. And with strong influence skills, you will have the ability to make an even greater impact in shaping and impacting decisions and actions made by your organization and your teams.
Yeah. Too often we see kind of this misalignment of what food safety and quality teams want to do in the rest of the organization, or it's embedded. And that's where this influence really empowers you to incorporate your vision and that strategy and those priorities into the way that everyone does work. And when you do that, that empowers those around you to do that as well. They get to make decisions on how to do their work to align with that bigger vision, strategy, and priorities versus having this fractionated approach to how we're doing work.
Yeah.
And you will find that without the ability to influence, some of those other critical skills, such as strategic abilities or project management skills, and even our coveted technical skills, they sometimes go to waste or the potential is not fully realized.
Yeah. And so the next slide shows that influence is really key, but influence is not magic. That's one thing that we make sure that we say, because people believe that, if I can just influence correctly, everything will fall into place. Everyone would do exactly what I want them to do, right? And it will be like magic,
Yeah.
right?
I always hope they're mind readers and they just know what to do.
Right. But just like you can't control everything, you cannot influence everything. There are elements that you can control, elements you can influence, and then there's elements that you can neither control nor influence, but you can only accept or adapt to. Your ability to be able to identify what elements or issues, right, like falls into what circle is the first step to really being able to influence.
Yeah. You know, and on the next slide, we show that really in order to break down silos, you must expand your circle of influence.
Mm.
You're hearing us often talk about it here and other places. But the concept is the skills that got you here to where you are today, your role, your organization, wherever you are, those skills have been awesome. You're here. But where you're looking to go, they're not going to fully get you there. The same thing applies when we talk about how do we break down silos and how do we influence better. You've got to move from where you are today, since you're not getting the results that you want, to something that's more or different than you do today. And the real question is, how do you do this?
Yeah.
And so the next slide is going to show a little bit of data, because we love data.
We do. And this data is actually from the Center for Creative Leadership, and they did a study to determine the effectiveness of these methods of influencing. So they use these methods. And so take a look at the data. What do you notice? Go to the next slide, because this is the first thing that I noticed. Out of the non-influence methods, rational persuasion is by far the most commonly used influence method. Right? And this makes sense to me because we have leaned on tell them the why, give them the data, right? Show them, right? Show them what's happening for many, many years. But I want you to take a look at how effective, or should I say ineffective, it is.
Yeah. You know, it is amazing. And, you know, to talk more about this rational persuasion, when we look at the column for resistance, there's 47% resistance.
Yeah.
So almost half the people, when we try to use data or say, well, this is what we're supposed to do, this is the right thing, compliance, all of that, they're like, only half the people, you know, maybe will consider it. The other half are resisting.
Yeah.
And when we look even further for like the best case scenario, which is the commitment, right? When we influence people, we want their commitment to go, I'm in, I'm with you. And for data, look at that number, 23%. 1 in 4 people might show up with commitment for you when you use data and rational persuasion.
Yeah.
If we think back, and I mean, I'm going to pick on a little bit of like pre-COVID, but even now, I think I still see this. Like, think about hand washing. How easy is it to get people to hand wash and have commitment that every time I walk onto the processing floor, every time I pick something up, every time I do this, like, I don't know about you, but after working in processing for a long time, that is still a challenge today.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, we always say, well, this is what we have to do. And I think when we also look at this, because we use a lot of data, when we look at even improving programs, let's say environmental monitoring, and we're looking at how do we sell this to, you know, our upper leadership? If we're using data, that's not going to do it for them. And as a technical expert where data is king, right, this can be a surprising, like, to me, this was mind-blowing to see that it's not very effective. But this just shows why being able to, you know, show data, but also explain the why isn't going to be enough to influence.
Yeah.
So on the next slide
shows that inspiration, on the other hand, had basically no resistance and almost all commitment.
Look at that.
That was like, ooh, you know, and that's because, you know, for us being technical experts and like we are taught to lean on this data, like we lean on what we know. We lean on our technical side. But as we step into leadership roles, whether you lead people directly or indirectly, being able to inspire commitment becomes even more important. It's not just about telling others the why, it's about telling others the why you should care about this. why you should champion this and be committed to this. You know,
Mhm.
do y'all love the example around hand washing? Because I'm in environments where there was like resistance, right? Or compliance. Why do I have to wash my hands after this activity? You know, like I don't really see the need. There's some resistance, or some people are like, fine, you know, whatever. I'll do it when you're around, right? That's really that compliance. But I've been in areas where there was true commitment to specifically hand washing, so much so that the facility knew we were running a drill, an internal tornado drill. So we had to go inside of the facility, and everyone stopped to wash their hands before going in the door. And like everyone knew it was a drill, right? So it wasn't an emergency, but everyone stopped and washed their hands, and they're looking at us like, are we supposed to do this? And then literally the team, the food safety team is like, okay, maybe we need to give some direction that if there's an emergency, what do? We step in, right? Like that was a conversation, but that's a really good point on people understood the why I personally should care about washing my hands before I entered the floor.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
that was like true champion.
That's inspired commitment.
It is. It
Yes.
is. And so as you think about like, how do I do this inspirational influence, right? Really the path to inspiring others is through building relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the next slide, we're going to see, right, just this whole like creating this network and getting people, I'll use the air quotes, on your side. You know, that isn't always the number one goal of influence, but it does help expand our network. And once you understand that influence is about building these relationships and champions of you and the common mission and vision, that's when you start to break down the silos. Influence is powerful, but it also takes intentional actions around building those relationships and being a better leader to even have those be effective influence methods.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to be a food safety nerd right now.
You are
And
one of the time, so.
I know it's like all the time, right? And so I want you to think about influence like your HACCP plan, right? Your HACCP plan cannot stand alone. You must have prerequisite programs to support it. So influence is one of our topics in our 14 module technical leader bootcamp program. But before we even talk about influence, our boot campers learn, practice, and reflect on 8 other critical aspects to support you being a technical leader. So that's because whether you have technical leaders or direct reports or not, right? Our technical leader boot camp was specifically designed to help you break down those silos by expanding your network and building relationships and creating manageable workloads. And then how that relates to influencing more effectively. So that's just the name of a few things. But that's important to talk about and discuss a little bit because influence doesn't stand alone. You have to do these critical aspects of really building relationships, right? To be able to get the results that you see in that study.
Yes. And that's why on the third part that we're going to touch on, we're going to talk a little bit more about like how do you actually move into that space. So on the next slide, you know, we've talked about that if you're relying on the skills you have today, right now, to be a better influencer and break down those silos, I think you all know by now that we're in the camp of that's not going to work. And we know that because we've seen it and with our teams and with our clients. You've been using those skills and not feeling as effective as you want. And those were great skills to get you where you were. I never want you to walk away and think, I don't have great skills. You are fantastic with what you bring to the table today. But you're here because you're ready to build and you're thinking about how do I build different skills to break down those silos. So let's talk about how you get the skills you need to be a better leader for you, for your team, so you can all be better business partners.
So we use this term technical leader throughout the presentation because we truly believe that leaders in a technical field must lead differently. You know, many operational roles can use traditional leadership models such as holding people accountable and issuing corrective action, right, when they haven't done their task, because they actually have direct accountability for the people. And technical roles like food safety, and you all know that's why you're here with us today, we have to use influence to make a big impact. And so traditional generic leadership development training just doesn't do it for us.
No. You know, as Tia said, you're going to hear us say it again. Technical leader, you need technical leadership development, because being a technical expert will keep you on where you're at on the influence scale. So we really need to think, like, how do we take a good look at ourselves? How do you take a look at yourself to see how do you contribute to the silos? And that's why when we're a better business partner, we look at those things so that we can increase self-awareness. We build new skills and we lean hard into soft skills. But here's the thing. It's not your fault that you don't have more of these skills to do influence differently. Because how can you know what you don't know?
Yeah.
And that takes us into the next slide.
Yeah, and our organizations haven't always supported us to have success, right? And so take a look at this slide, right? In 2018, on average, companies gave employees 12 minutes of manager training every 6 months. 12 minutes. 41% of business leaders believe that their organizations fail to meet the needed leadership standards. But to me, seeing these statistics, right, it's like, no wonder we don't have the ability to break down these silos, to influence differently, to build relationships differently, right? The majority of companies expect people to step into leadership roles without providing leadership training. We are promoted because of our technical expertise, but we struggle with the leadership side. And the reason why we struggle in food safety and quality is because we are people who have been highly trained in science, and we speak that language. And even when we think we're not speaking science or technical jargon, we're still not communicating effectively to influence and have the outcomes we want, which is really inspiring people, right, to be champions of food safety and the common mission and vision.
Yes. And I think we can see this, right? So if you think about how many certificates or degrees do you have for food safety? You probably have like HACCP certification, and maybe PCQI, human food, animal food, FSVP, humane handling. Like there's a whole pile of them, right? Yeah, I always call it alphabet soup after the name, which is cool, right? That's why we're in these roles, because we bring this skill set and this knowledge base that others don't have. But now I want you to stop for a moment and think, how many certificates or degrees do you or your team have for leadership? We tend to find there's a big difference. And what I love is it's not just us that see this. Earlier this year, Tia and I were at Food Safety Summit, and Sean Stevens was in a session, and he said the biggest mistake he sees companies making for food safety is not investing in food safety. Shocker, right? Shocker. But he specifically said in developing people. So developing people and their leadership skills is that essential part to helping break down the silos. And so if you go to the next slide, I really want us to think about, as technical leaders, right, we often think our role is to write a better recall plan, to lead the HACCP team, to flag new products that are risks. Yes, yes, and yes. Those are important things our food safety function needs to do. Yet your job as a leader, and like Tia said, whether you have direct reports or not, you're still a leader, is to take care of the people around you so that you can better influence and inspire them. And that is really what a leader does. So bringing people from other functions of your organization together to collaborate is really what you need to do to break down these silos and be that partner.
Yeah. And so the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about coaching, because it really is the base of Catalyst. And we've been talking a lot about influence, and we need to get these skills on influencing and building relationships. And it's easier said than done, right? The path from knowing what we do, and that's like that training, right, to actually doing it, which is that execution, is longer and rockier than people think. right? Like you might have came here and said, you know what, I'm going to get all this information and I'm going to go and do. But then things start piling up on your plate, right? And you start to get discouraged and people start to tell you no, and it's just not working, right? What you'll see on the next slide, but before we go, like coaching is the key to successfully getting through this path and building stronger technical leaders that are business partners. It's not about being trained to be a new leader or a better leader. It's about practicing and exploring and being curious about your behavior and other humans around you. It's about letting go of having all the answers and engaging others to have a more well-rounded solution for the business. And really, only coaching can provide this. And so the next slide, we'll cover a little data because after all, we are still technical experts.
We are. And I think, hand washing is a good example of this. How many times have we trained on hand washing and yet we don't always get the execution we want? And that's where coaching and learning to coach also is another important part. But I think when people hear coaching, they go, gosh, isn't that what we do for executives? Well, guess what? It is not just for executives anymore. At least not for the organizations that we work with or companies that say people are our greatest assets.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. Look at some of the results people and organizations receive from coaching. And this is pure coaching, which is a little bit different than sometimes maybe where we hear in other spaces. But as you can see, coaching works. It's far more effective than training. Individuals massively improve soft skills that improve job satisfaction, and all that translates into organizational strength, savings for the company, and increased profits. That's because these results come from individuals that tap into their internal motivation. See, we're back to that internal motivation, inspiration that's influencing. And that all supports behavior change. It's helping people really connect, that they have purpose and their work matters. And when we do that, we can step into being business partners differently than we did before.
Yeah. So the next slide shows what developing new skills might look like, right? It's relatable, it's practical, it's well planned and progressive, and it allows space for practice, reflection, and sharing. And so this is Catalyst's Technical Leadership Development Program, and we're using it today to share it as an example of what technical leadership development could look like for you. Each step along the path is practical, right? Relatable, well planned, and grounded in coaching. And it's not about one and done, right? It's really about this progressive path that's growing as you grow in your organization. That's what you want to look for. You want to cover the key leadership topics like influence and relationship building, but you also want to tap into some technical topics like workload capacity and decision making. And the reason why you want to do that is because that is what distracts from some of those soft skills, right? If your workload is not right size for you, then you're probably doing a lot of firefighting. And it's hard to build relationships and put intentional time into that if you're firefighting all the time.
Yeah, it is. And we know to move out of that space, that requires a shift in our mindset and a shift in our behaviors and our habits. And that's why even as you go through a program like this, like you're going to spend months, our clients spend months working at each stage of this development because we have to practice often, because we have to change behaviors. We have to reinforce the new skills we've learned so that we can do things like influence better to break down the silos.
Yeah.
And the other part is, I don't know about you, but right, as I progressed in my career and as our clients do, their leadership needs shift too.
Mm-hmm.
We actually had one client who was starting in a new director role and said, I want to start off in a better spot with my team. And they started in our program. And they were more people focused and they worked on right sizing, workload capacity, all of these things. Now, a couple years in, her team is really clear about expectations and support because she put people first. But now she's in a spot where she's working more up and across to drive new programs and improvements. And those skills, while they're similar, they're different. Once
Mhm.
again, the skills that got her there are not the same ones that are helping her be really more effective, influencing, and being more business partner minded.
Yeah.
So this commitment to to continue this intentional leadership development work really, takes work. This is what it takes to break down silos and to nurture those relationships. And so when you're looking for something, a well-planned program like ours is designed to be progressive, to provide more concepts for you as you grow and mature in leadership as technical leaders in food, so you can continue growing and contributing more as a business partner.
Mhm. And this all leads to better business results, right? So the next slide shows what the data says, right? Like data shows that being a more effective technical leader is what drives business results like these, right? Driving important business metrics is part of what we do and as business partners. And this is direct money to the bottom line. Of course, ensuring the right food safety and quality metrics as KPIs, right, is critical. But we won't dive deep into that. That's just something for you all to think about, right? You want to make sure they're the right metrics for it. But we know that this leads to better business results, which is exactly where we want to be.
Absolutely. And the next slide even shows what data has reported. When you continue your development journey and ensure those around you are developing too, look at what you get. 218% higher income per employee. That's huge.
Oh, yes.
So, because once again, when we think about how we take care of people and how we influence people around us and how we become better business partners, this translates into business results. And
Mm.
so using stats like this to get support for your development shows that the food safety quality function is acting as a business partner.
So as we go to the next slide, we hope that you have been able to take away 2 or 3 key points to help you start to break down those silos in your organization. But I will say, if there's one thing to take away, like one thing to highlight, it is to invest in your people so that they will be better leaders, better influencers, and better business partners, because that really is key to breaking down those silos.
Yes. And if you're curious about more details on boot camp and those concepts that Tia talked about, on the next slide is a QR code. Take your phone out, scan that. It's going to let you download our boot camp module details so you see more about how you start building these different technical skills to get different outcomes.
Mhm.
And really, like we said, boot camp is the first step of our program to up leveling your leadership skills to be more influential so that you have better business results. And the
Mhm.
next cohort starts September 12th.
Yes.
So if you're ready to join us, we are happy to have you. And you can always connect with Tia and I on LinkedIn. And we're always happy to get emails to see where you're at, how we can help you, your team, and your organization, because with leadership, we're driving the food safety culture that you want to see. So thank you so much for having us. It has
Yes.
been our pleasure to be here, and we look forward to questions.
Yes.
Wow, I can't tell you both how much I appreciated this because I've just been writing soundbite after soundbite. Like these things belong on bumper stickers or T-shirts. Everybody needs. Yeah, so thank you both because I think this was a pretty great way to kind of jog us all in the head to say, hey, we're all people. We all are after the same goals, but we get so focused on our individual day-to-day stuff and we don't bring other people into our worlds, our orbit, and say, hey, what matters to you? Here's what matters to me. And then work together as partners. I think that was just such a valuable, powerful thing to say. And also the other thing I wanted to point out was that I forget who it was that said it, but if you're firefighting, you
Mhm.
can't grow, you can't change. Amazingly profound there. And we're all guilty, right? We all get
Yeah.
bogged down in the weeds, and it's tough to get your head up. And some folks here, I'm sure on this call can relate. You don't know what you're walking into every day when you go into the facility. Some things are just kind of they could get pretty crazy. So it's tough to start thinking more broadly about again, getting everybody around this mind frame of they impact food safety. This is
Mhm.
important to you, even though you don't even maybe work on the floor. It still matters. So
Right.
Yeah.
thank you both. Yes.
Yes. And making that connection that not only is it important, but it impacts business results.
Right.
Hmm.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah, and obviously, you said it up front. You're more than just compliance, right? Again, we are business partners. We're here to grow the business, to grow as individuals, and we all support each other. So it's kind of funny that stat that you showed that showed 12 minutes, 12
Right.
minutes of training, and if you could just change that one little thing,
Right.
everybody wins. It's crazy.
Right, exactly. Jill and I, we were talking the other day because we're always talking about this stuff where it's like a lot of times we're like, oh, my manager or this leader doesn't understand. It's like, well, they're only getting 12 minutes of leadership,
Hmm.
right? Like even just
Hmm.
talking about it and understanding, and the fact that being in a technical role is just so different than being able to say, you know what, if you're not going to follow it, then you're going to follow this process of corrective action. We typically don't
Right.
have that in food safety.
No.
And so
Right.
it kind of just puts it in a different perspective to say, okay, I need to give my leaders grace because they probably haven't had the training, they probably haven't had the development, right? That I probably don't have in my role. So it's about
Right.
how do we get the development together, right? How do we shift this mindset together so that we can start building relationships, across the aisle to other silos, right? So we can start breaking down those walls.
Mhm.
Yeah, and again, it's about being people. As you called with that stat, using
Yeah.
data alone isn't going to help you get that influence or get that partnership developed. So I appreciated that. Now we've been getting lots of questions, and I've been doing my best to kind of consolidate them into different categories. So
Right.
I'm going to start with it just is very clear just from I would say a lot of these questions I'm seeing is around visibility. How do
Hmm.
you absolutely know that food safety culture is healthy or not? And is that something that you can use to help influence others within the organization? So if you have a way to assess it or show some type of metric to approach them to say, look, we've got a problem. This is impacting not just our team, but your team and the rest of the company.
Yeah. Yeah. This is such a good question, and one that we talk about often. I'll start with the very first part of that question is how do we know,
Mhm.
right? How do we know where our culture is? And what we always say is to have a conversation. Talk to your people. And this is just outside of like, there's many assessments out there and that type of thing that exists. But the key is to have a conversation. If you go to your facility and you start asking them about how does food safety relate to their role, and they can't tell you, right? That should be a flag for you, right? And not a green one, right? Like that should be,
Right.
depending on what they say, a yellow or a red flag. If you go
Hmm.
to your finance function and you say, hey, I want to meet with you at a frequency, right, and discuss things that impact both of us. What kind of topics would you cover in that meeting? And they don't have anything to say, right? That's a gap. And so what a lot of people do is that they, I wouldn't even say hide behind the data, right? They're hiding behind, oh, we got to go and collect this data. We got to go and do these assessments. We got to go and do this when we're really not impacting culture or really even understand what the results of that data is trying to tell us because we haven't actually had the conversations with people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the data loses its meaning because it doesn't personally impact the
Right.
Yes.
the other
And
party. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think we saw that as we even looked at the different influence methods. So it's not that we're saying data isn't important. It
Mhm.
is. So use the data because we still need some metric to help us. But we can also think about what are some of the qualitative things we do. So
Right.
quantitative, I have an assessment, a survey, but then the qualitative part of that is here are snippets or quotes of voices that I am hearing as I'm asking people. Like, is
Right.
it easy for you to do food safety? What would make it easier? What are the things that keep you working here? If you were going to leave, why? Why would you leave? Those are sometimes hard questions we don't want to ask people, but those are the things that then are like the symptoms of the other parts. And so when we can collect that, we start to get better insights about what is the actual culture like and what are people thinking that they don't necessarily raise their hand and say in a survey or in a town hall.
Right. I will also say, like, if you don't even know where to start with our poll question. Ask
Hmm.
people, hey, like, when you talk to food safety or when food safety comes into the room, do you see us as a showstopper or an enabler?
Mhm.
Let's see what they say. And I've asked those questions before, and they're like, when I see food safety, I think it's the audit police coming in, and I'm curious about that. Tell me more. Tell me more. Why? How can we change this perception? And reassuring them that's not how we want to be seen. So we have work to do, right? And over time, right? And because this is not like that's not who we are, right? And things are supposed to change immediately. This is the long game, right?
Yeah.
It takes time and effort and intentional actions to change people perceptions, which is all about culture.
It it comes to mind again. I'm trying to put myself in somebody else's shoes here, so forgive me if this comes out weird. But hey, I'm a QA manager, and I'm trying to interact with somebody, let's say in continuous improvement, and help them understand the importance of quality and safety, and understand how what they're doing is impacting what we're trying to achieve in terms of food safety. And they are just so busy, again, firefighting, but they are just so busy trying to make sure that line stays operational. And they have their own KPIs and they have their own things that they're worrying about every single day, possibly even every hour. Because if the line goes down, it's kind of everybody's problem.
Right?
So how do you get somebody to just stop and focus and believe, right? Because again, that's part of, I think, some of that survey data that you showed is you have to believe that food safety is important to me, even though I'm in CI or somewhere else, right?
Yeah. You
Sometimes
know,
I think
oh, go ahead, Jill.
sometimes I think the best thing you can say or try out is I want to help you. I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they don't see us as wanting to help. And so I think in food safety, when we even start like, I'm here to help you.
Interesting,
How
yeah.
can I best do this?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Even if
You know,
it doesn't seem to be related to food safety. If they're like, well, this is the part that's I'm struggling with, good. Let's figure that out because within that, there is bound to be some element related to food safety.
mhm.
Correct.
Yes. I think with Jill too, like to expand on that, like you're talking about what do they value?
Right.
What do they value at work? And within that question, right, there were all these values of we can't stop the line, right?
Mhm.
Like that is to me, I like hone in on that. I'm like, we can't stop the line because we need to get product out. And
Hmm.
so now I know that's a value, and I'm having the conversation around, food safety can stop the line, right? Food safety can
Yes, it can.
prevent product from going out, right? And whatever the issue is, right? Like you can't come in with like a million issues, right? Like, but whatever it is you're trying to get done, relating it to that value. Hey, I don't want the line to stop either. I want to get the product out because I buy this stuff, right? Like if it's
Right,
not on the shelves, I can't get it. My
right.
family can't get it. We don't get paid, right? All the things that people value. And then it goes to this is why I'm concerned about this food safety issue is
Mhm.
because even though product gets shipped, it comes right back to us. And the goal of getting product on the shelf that we both value, it doesn't happen. And so now you've related it to a value that they care about, right? Why do they care? They care because they want to produce product. So how are we enabling them to do that through
Right.
food?
So how about let's look at top down and bottom up kind of approach here, where you have even like the line worker who might even have some food safety KPIs or things like that, but maybe aren't necessarily under the umbrella of FSQA. Um, is there ways to, I don't know, enable them or give them some kind of incentive around being better around food safety? I know you had the example of the tornado. drill, and everybody, they just do it when somebody's watching. But is there techniques or tactics that you can maybe subscribe for some folks to help, line workers and even executives to start making food safety sort of a cultural thing, a company-wide thing, and make it more visible?
Yeah, I love just the whole thought, right, that everyone should have food safety. Food safety should be a part of everyone's goals and how it relates to them, right? So I think that's a piece of it. Is how do we make sure that food safety is at the table, right? And that they are a part of the broader business goals and plans. Sometimes we lose track because we're not at the table, right? We don't have those relationships. We're not a part of those decisions. But the goal would be that we are, so that our business goals, our business growth is based off of, finance goals, some operation goals, and also food safety goals. And people understand how their role impacts that goal, even if they're not in food safety and quality.
Right.
And I'm going to add to that, they need to be meaningful.
Yes.
So for example, when I first years ago started working on KPIs, our organization said, how about no non-compliances? And I worked at a USDA facility. So how about no NRs? That means we're doing things right. And because I was young and, wasn't on the path where I am right now, I was like, okay, well, guess what? That did not drive the things that we needed. It didn't help us move from compliance to like improvement and culture. And so when we talk about having shared goals, I really would challenge people to go, yes, having few NRs is important. That is a metric that I want to track somewhere, but that isn't necessarily the one that I want to keep our eye on to know if we're improving.
Yeah. And that's the hard part, I think, right? I think the hard part is figuring out for your organization too, right? Like your organization might have different metrics than another organization's, and that's okay because we have different cultures, we have different people. And so really understanding what do our people value,
Right.
and then relating that, right, is key.
Yes, and I think going back to that value, so even with an executive or a senior leader, like as we talk about even managing up, it's okay to ask questions like, can you tell me how this decision or how this relates to our value around food safety?
Right.
Can you just explain so that way I'm better prepared to explain it to my team on why we made this business decision? It is okay to ask those questions and be open and curious to see how they see it. And then it is a place where you can then start conversation, maybe about if you see it the same or if you see it differently.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, this is really just one of those things where we have to allow people to lift their heads up and listen. So again, becoming that partner and showing value. I'm here to help you. You're here to help me. We're all in it together. I love it. That's good. I'm getting some comments here. I got one here from Jeff said, this is an excellent example of what we in QA/QC need to share with all production team leadership. I think this really can open the eyes of production leadership and show what we can do to be better partners and be a powerful team together. And then Karen says, hello, thank you for this presentation. It's just what I needed at this time. And I've saved information for the boot camp. So look out for Karen. She might be signing up for some boot camp. I think this is a good stopping point for us because we have some more information just to share. If you're interested to hear about food safety culture and other tips and tactics, you can definitely check out Tia and Jill's website at foodsafetycatalyst.com. I'm going to actually go back here to that slide. Here you go. There's that QR code for the bootcamp sign up. There's obviously a lot more information and a lot more detail around all of the points given today. So definitely have that conversation with Jill and Tia. And to you both, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on today. We'd love to have you back. So we'll be talking later about some food safety culture initiatives that we can bring back to the folks here for Beyond Compliance. But thank you so much for your time. And thank you, everybody, for signing up and joining us today. And we hope to see you at the next Beyond Compliance. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.